Cottages are 55 and up, and those are single-story. So that's all actively going on Friendship Lane across from the new middle school campus.
I can't hear
And can you talk just a little bit about Friendship Oaks and the status of that subdivision?
Yeah, so Friendship Oaks, that's the one that Lennar, obviously Lennar's a very large home builder across the country. They're the ones doing the extension of South Creek Street at Friendship Lane, and that will punch out to South 87. And so there's 4 phases. Most of that is single family, but there is a multi-family component. And part of that was not included in your report yesterday. So that one I've added.
Where is it on our pages?
It's going to be on page 3.
Multi-family is on page
You're
5.
talking about the single family residential, the Friendship Oaks.
Oh,
The
well.
list of all of those is on page 3 right here.
That's the one that stopped.
That's the one that did have a long pause, yes.
Pause,
Oh, have
yes.
they started again?
Yes.
They are ready to move forward with
Oh, they did.
taking phase 1. So that's Friendship Oaks, 4 phases. The extension of South Creek, that'll punch out to 87 South. 4 phases of single family, but also a separate phase of multifamily. So that's quite a bit, that project in and of itself. And that single family portion is the city's Fbg.Live municipal utility district. So then, but they have started, they're moving forward. So that in and of itself will really change this chart that you see on page 4. But right now, the projected 50 is because we've not seen, we've talked to Lennar, we know they're trying to proceed with phase 1. So once they start pulling permits, that's a very quick process. So that project in and of itself could really bump up that last number for 2023 on page 4, the single family.
Right, so let's talk about this graph just a little bit. So we hear about this massive population growth in Fredericksburg all the time. The big subdivision on Friendship Lane that you were just talking about, almost 500 lots. You see all this dirt moving around, all these lots, the 1,221 lots. Well, this is how many single-family residential building permits have been issued since 2012 each year. So I just wanted to put this into perspective a little bit. You see a lot of this growth around the tail end, or I guess the middle to the tail end of the pandemic. You know, a lot of development, a lot of people buying up land, a lot of subdivision going on. But now we're back to more of that normal growth. So in terms of our residential growth, we feel like that's going to, remain on that just slight trajectory up. We have about a 1.2% growth rate and have had for the last 3 decades in Fredericksburg. Now, when we talk about adding another 1,000 apartment units, that may change things a little bit. We don't know exactly who's going to occupy those. We would hope that the service industry workers and so forth would be some of those that rent those apartments. But talking to a couple of council members in Port Aransas, they did a similar project or had some similar projects that were built down there, a 300-unit complex to help support the service industry workers commuting in from Corpus and other places. And when those became available, they filled up with people from all over the United States. And they captured about 5% of what their objective was. So at this point, they're not earmarked for anyone specific. We have really no idea who may be moving into those.
But Clinton worker bees can't afford some of these apartments.
Well, I understand that. So they're all market rate. And, the rents are going to be, I think, the minimum 1,100 for, a less than 600 square foot, 1 bedroom, 1 bath apartment. And I've heard numbers in the $1,500 to $1,800 dollar a month range for the 2 bedroom. So again, we've got a lot of them. Not sure who can afford that, or again, who's going to live there. But it's expensive if you live here to live here as well. That's another issue. Every time we go to a restaurant, I ask the wait staff, ask everyone, do you live here? And if you don't, why don't you? If you take your family to a nice restaurant in Fredericksburg, you're probably going to be standing in line. It's on Thursday through the weekend, and you're probably dropping $150, $200 pretty easy. So again, those are some of the comments we hear. People don't mind commuting. They make the money here. And then they go back to Bernie or Comfort or Kerrville, it seems like. So, yes, ma'am.
One quick thing, it would be nice on these pages, I mean, these are great, but it would be nice if on the side we could say, like, what price range the houses are, or what range the apartments are, so that we can kind of get an idea of, are we fulfilling the need for, because it should be on your permits.
Right, a lot of that information we do not have. But as that information is available, if you go online and take a look at this presentation, it actually includes a lot more slides than what we're going over today. And some of that information is included. Now, this is just the starting point for this presentation. We're going to keep refining it, adding information like that. That's the kind of feedback we'd like to have today. If there's something you'd like to see, again, this is meant for you. This is meant to educate the public on what all's going on in the city. A lot of questions that we get all the time. We're trying to address that this way, in one of the many ways, pushing information out to the public.
So picking back up on the multifamily, we said there were 583 under construction. And then recently completed, we have 70, so that includes Eagles Village, which is actually short-term rentals. They were approved as condominiums, but those are short-term rentals over on Eagle Street. Vineyard Crossing Apartments, that was the addition to an existing apartment complex behind Whataburger. So that added 38 new units. And then the Friendship Lane cottages were also approved as condominiums, but then converted to short-term rentals. So then looking at multifamily approved, but not yet started, we've got 629. So that number is different than what you're seeing on yours because you don't have Friendship Oak Ranch duplexes. And so that's part of that Friendship Oaks at South Creek and Friendship. So that would be 60 new units. Let's see. But then, so also on the multifamily approved, not started, is the Seiko project at Friendship Lane. That'll also be some mixed use. The front will have some retail, but that's 32 acres, about 95 units at Friendship and South Eagle. Also on Friendship is Botanica that's been approved, and that's 148 units, single story, with all these horizontal apartments essentially. Keller Oaks Phase 1 townhomes have been approved, and that's the side of the hill between Windcrest and Burger King. They kind of put some townhomes there. And then another large one that's not on your list is actually the Verandas at Freedom, and that's 305 units. And part of that is age restricted, 55 and up. So that's on the large Freedom campus.
So that's what's bumping the number from 371 to 629?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, so 629 is the new approved, not started multifamily number, which should be in green.
And how much was Veranda?
How many verandas? Is 305 total units, but I do know a good portion of that is 55 and up.
Just another suggestion along with prices, if you could add addresses later, that would kind of give an idea.
Yes, on my new one I've got location. Sometimes we don't always have addresses until they really start building.
Or location.
Yes.
So what we're working on is an interactive map, and we hope to have that sort of thing up on the wall so we can go around and show you exactly where these things are, what they consist of, timelines, and so forth. So again, we're not quite there yet, but that is something that we're working on.
We requested a GIS position in the budget to do
Right.
all the mapping because it's.
So work in progress. I'm going to ask Dennis to come up here, just give us a quick county update before he has to step out. Do you have just a minute, Dennis? You're going to need the microphone.
Can you hear me?
No,
No, this is.
Well,
I've got cord at 9 o'clock, so.
You're going to need the microphone, so if you could give us a quick county update before you have to step out.
You bet. Well, thank you for the opportunity to come here and be a part of these meetings with Clinton. I think it's important that the city and the county do a lot of talking, a lot of communication on what's going on. We just got through working with fire and EMS and on our partnership that we have going. think it was all constructive, and we'll see how it works out in final budget and our meetings and those kinds of things. The one thing that I'm seeing that as I thought about, since I only have a few minutes, I'm just going to hit the big issues that are on the top of my head, is that we've got a lot of issues with Mass Gatherings Act that I've never seen before in my 7 years. When you're talking about bringing 30, 40,000 people into one event, that makes a big impact, on all our infrastructure. When you're talking about the eclipse and the concerns over the eclipse. And so one of the things that I would just relay to the group, I think it's very, very important that we keep the Sheriff's Department strong, we keep law enforcement strong. And talking and visiting with the district attorney and his budget and what was going on there, I was really surprised that we had so many cases from Honduras and countries that are pretty far away from here. So those are kind of changes that I think we just need to be embraced with, be ready to step up where we need to step up with safety for the county. That's all I'm going to talk about. Because if I'm not there at 9 o'clock, Daniel Jones is going to take my maintain.
All right. Well, we appreciate you being here, and thank you for the call. Yes, sir. If you have any specific county questions, we'll take those to the commissioners after the meeting. So feel free to ask those. Moving on to Public Works. Yes, ma'am.
One question.
Sure.
All these developments that we have, you know, we have a broken record about the water, okay? About water. Why? You want me to
So we will let you speak into the microphone.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am broken record Rosemary Heskinson about water. Nothing's going to happen around here unless we take care of our water, and we are not doing due diligence. Once again, we have all these developments coming in, and that's great. Be careful what you ask for. Okay? Why can we not, and I don't know, as an attorney in the room, speak up. Why can we not mandate that everybody that builds anything, I don't care if it's a single family unit or 500 units or whatever, whether it's in the county or in the city? What about dual flush toilets? Is that too much to ask? That's all I'm saying. Can we do that?
Right.
Don't know.
That's
Okay.
part of the comprehensive planning process that we're going through right now. Our development standards will change for development that will include a lot of these water conservation, smart fixtures and things like that. We're taking a look at that now more than ever. In fact, before too long, you'll see a couple of projects on city properties that include rainwater catchment and reuse. Those are the sorts of things that we're going to begin promoting across the community. But again, you know, one of the reasons why I show you the graph on the residential side, residential outdoor irrigation accounts for about 70% of our overall water consumption. Apartments don't use that much. Probably somewhere currently in the 5% range, but we're doubling that potentially. So again, we're watching that population growth, and we're pretty comfortable, pretty confident with what the future looks like for our water supply until we get something like that coming out of the ground, and there are some unknowns with how that might impact that water supply. Chris is going to go over some of that here in just a little bit. In fact, we're just going right into Public Works. But I will say this up front. We went into stage 4 a little bit earlier this year. For the first time, gosh, and probably, I don't know the last time we went into stage 4. Quite honestly, once per week outdoor watering, 4 hours on your designated day. That's not much water. 8 hours a day on that day is not much water. And we've been in that stage for a long time. Being in stage 3 helped us bank a lot of that water, prepare for what we're going through right now. We have an entire week of 100-degree temperatures here. But I can tell you this, that there are very few water violations, and we're watching. There were 28 last month. That's pretty good for 6,000 connections. So thank you for following those new watering restrictions and being cognizant of what Rosemary's talking about, because it's important. We have one supply here of water, and that's groundwater. And that's it. So we're very careful how we manage that. So I'm sorry your yard's burning up. I live at 1215 Dove Run Hollow. You can drive by my house, it's burning up too. So we're all paying the price for that. Georgetown, there are sections of Georgetown that went to no outdoor watering this week. Blanco, down to 24-hour water supply. I think that was a mechanical issue. But, you know, I see Lenny back there, and Lenny, I want you to weigh in on this here just a little bit, send some of this information over. You know, that I-35 corridor, which is the eastern boundary of the Hill Country region, is really growing fast. You know, I talked to the Hayes County Water District manager, and they're running out of water, and they can't replace it. And they're the fastest growing county in the United States. So we're not faced with that here yet, but the Hill Country region is the fastest growing region in the state of Texas. So again, 80% population growth, 50 years, 70% of that coming to the Hill Country region. Just to put that into perspective, what that looks like. According to the experts, we will need 1,300% more water supply at that point than we have today.
Where's it going to come from?
And that's a good question, and that's something that everyone across the state that has anything to do with water all the way to the state capital is wrestling with right now. If you look at the state water plan, you can see a lot of the water conservation measures. I'll tell you one of them that came out of this legislative session was the state pushed out, I believe it was $2 billion to rural counties to help repair their water distribution systems. We have consistently, over the last 5 years in Fredericksburg, had 5% system water loss or less. We've been down below 2%. When Chris and I came on board here about a decade ago, we were about 13%. We're now saving enough water to accommodate 1,000 people living in Fredericksburg, or a little bit less than 10 years worth of pressure, right? So this $2 billion pushed out to these rural counties. The average rural city has a 50% water loss. So for every 2 gallons they push out of the system, they lose 1 gallon. So that infrastructure, making those repairs, saves water instead of going down developing more. So water conservation efforts like that, development of 600 new reservoirs across the state of Texas, desalination is one of them, aquifer storage and recovery, tertiary treatment. But the main thing is to be more responsible with it. And, you know, indications are that people are doing that here in Fredericksburg. How many live out in the county? How many have their own well? You're a little bit worried about the future of that well right now? Okay, well that's the same kind of thinking you need to have when you turn on that faucet or turn on that sprinkler system. So I know everybody in this room is doing that. Thank you. It takes all of us to do that. Chris, water, not water conservation, public works.
So I'll start on page 7. We'll just move here. Start on page 7, just an update on one of the projects that is very visible on East Main Street with the lane closures and the traffic controls. This is the East Main Street water line project. That's a rehab, it's a replacement of an existing water main that's many years old. So again, talking about taking care of our infrastructure so that we don't have that higher water loss. This project right here is one of those projects. Essentially, the extent of the project goes from Natural Grocers, so the west side of the bridge there, all the way out to the UPS store at Crystal Drive. The contractor has completed everything essentially from Ace Hardware out to Crystal Drive, and that section of line is now in service. You see the traffic control right there by McDonald's, Church's Chicken. They're completing the bore underneath the creek this week and hope to be finished by next week. Then they'll continue back towards South Heights or towards Ace Hardware and complete that portion of the water line. The schedule for this project is to be completed by the end of our fiscal year or the end of September of this year. So to follow that, Texas actually has a mill and overlay project to replace, basically mill out some of the hot mix asphalt and replace that. So there's a lot of areas, not only in that section of town, but in many other sections of town, Main Street in particular, that hot mix is in pretty bad shape. So that'll all be replaced It's idea of this project. I'll jump, before I get into our offer levels and so forth, I'll jump into page 11, just a quick update there on our annual street paving project. So typically we try to do our street paving in the months of June and July. Because of some of the weather we had early this spring, the blessed rains we had, it did put some of our prep work a little bit behind. They're completing that prep work right now, and most of the paving will take place in August and September. So those streets that are paved this year, you'll get door hangers and so forth. But a lot of that work will take place in August and September. The one project that we will complete at the end of July is the paving of South Adams there by the primary school before school opens. So that is, I think, scheduled for July 25th, if I'm not mistaken. So that's kind of the bigger overall public works projects. We have some smaller projects, but I wanted to update you on those two. Jumping straight into back into water again, because obviously with these hot, dry conditions, it's top of our radar. So on page 8, we've been putting this together. It's called the water report card. So we're basically looking at each month and we're comparing that to the previous year. So this report card compares June 2023 to June 2022. As everybody recalls, last year was very hot and dry. Started early in the year, went all the way through even into early fall, and even beyond that, it seemed like. But essentially, this is just looking at what we pumped out of the ground. So if you look at the high use days, that's for this month, or for this year, June 2023. So we did hit over 4 million gallons on the 28th of June. We saw these temperatures really start changing. But our low use day was the beginning of June again, when we were getting blessed rains in this area. If you compare the daily use, though, from last year to this year, 3.5 million gallons last year per day to just under 2.5 million gallons per day this year, it was over 1 million gallons per day on average, less than we were pumping last year. So we were very happy to see that. Yes, ma'am.
I have a real hard time relating to these numbers because they're so huge. Have you got this information broken down in a per person, per day usage rate?
This is just production out of the ground, like our wells.
This is just what
We have the water meter data. Obviously, we can put all that together. We have it residential, commercial, multifamily accounts.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is that the last number that I could find anywhere was with the Alliance report, and they have the use per person per usage rate at 196 gallons per day.
It's right around 200 gallons.
200 gallons now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the city of San Antonio's got their rate down to 120 gallons. So what my question is, and this, Chris, I know you can't answer this, but perhaps you can, and that is, I don't think that just the city, or just the county, or just the underground water district is going to solve it. I think it has to be a combination of all three, and you've got to set a target, like San Antonio did at 120 gallons, so that everybody in this city and in this county can shoot for that, because you tell me that you're pumping this many millions of gallons, and it's like, holy crap, that's a lot. But it doesn't tell me what I need to do. So when it comes to water conservation, my question for all three, city, county, underground water district, is what are you doing? How are you educating the community about water conservation so that we can target that rate and get it down?
You want to talk about annual water conservation plan and some of those targets that we shoot for as well?
Yeah, so every 5 years we submit a report. Actually, every year we submit a report to the Texas Water Development Board. But every 5 years we update our water conservation plan. And it does have some target goals in there about lowering our daily per person water use.
Where can I find this?
Absolutely. I'm not sure if it's on the city's website. Yeah, I'm not sure. I know we do post an annual water report. That is on there. It's called the Consumer Conference Report. We have to send, in fact, all of our utility customers get that annually. Usually
an account like a regular water receipt report?
No.
Okay, so there's no city.
City's not, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Hey, real quick, with Paul retiring, and sent in and got some good positive answers, I would like to see by next month, what is the plan for replacing Paul and getting that, not losing that expertise? And, I mean, as you pointed out, there's three elements here that have to work together, and if that one falls down and we don't have the knowledge captured or some expertise, or something. So I would really like to see a plan for how that could happen.
Right. And we're in contact with the board, talking to Paul about what that looks like coming up. And we know he's still going to be involved for some time. So he says.
Confidence that there is a plan.
Right,
Let us
exactly. So I'll bring that back next time to report to this group.
So to finish out page 8, the water report part here, all of these numbers were very good, and we're happy to see and thank all of our customers for the water conservation efforts. Beginning of June was blessed with rains, the end of June, certainly the beginning of July here, we have not been blessed with rains, and we've been blessed with hot, dry temperatures, unfortunately. So I provided some slides here, page 9 and page 10 of your packet, that shows the 2 monitoring wells, and anybody can get this information. It's available in the Texas Water Development Board. This is their monitoring equipment. We look at it, Alzheimer looks at it at the Water Conservation Board, but this information is available to the public. These charts were put together on July 12th when we were putting this presentation together, and you have updated numbers for you as well. You can just see the trends. So we are trending, I'd say, fairly well. We have had some rain, but we have not had that just recurring rains to really rebound like we'd like. We talk about this all the time. This is not a drought that we were just in last year. This is a drought that we've been below average rainfall for the last 5 years. So this is a continued drought that we continue to experience, unfortunately. Hopefully, with El Nino, that turns around this fall, but we have not seen that to the full extent. But just a quick update on this. This is the canal, page 8, canal well field. So this is about half the city's water supply, maybe just over half the city's water supply. You can see that essentially we were about where we were this time last year. So we might be slightly higher on July 12th, but I can tell you right now, looking at it yesterday morning, we were basically exactly where we were this time last year in that well field. We're about 10 feet lower than we were 30 days ago. So we do continue to see that upward drop with these high temperatures. We would expect that. Any questions about the canal well field?
Yeah, I do have a question, Jim, Chris. So when you say it's down 10 feet, what's the total depth?
Sure. Our equipment is about 180 feet. So that's below the ground surface. We do see between 80 feet and 100 feet, it dropped fairly quickly. I mean, that's just historically it does drop. When we get to that 100 feet to 105 feet, it kind of sustains itself. And we saw that last year. We got to about 108 feet last year. Getting to that 100 to 105 feet went fairly quickly, but then once we got there, it kind of leveled out. You can actually see that on this chart here. So that well field does rebound quicker with rainfall. We do see a rebound in the canal well field quicker than we do in this next slide that I'll show you. Hence, more of the movement in that water table on the chart. Old San Antonio Road well field is another monitoring well that we look at daily. This well field does take a little longer to see a response to rainfall. We're tracking a little bit above where we were this time last year, but again, that is slowly trending downward as well. So we were very blessed again. Said this a few times already with the rainfall. We did see that response to the offer, but now we with this high drier temperatures, and this is typical. It's pretty typical for July, August, even into September before those rainfall starts. So I would also say that our daily water production for the first 17, 18 days here of July, we're about 3.2 million gallons. Sometimes we're hitting at 3.6. But when we look at last year's numbers, we were at 4.5, 4.3. So conservation efforts, again, stage 4 water restrictions had helped those numbers. So we were pumping still, compared to last year, probably 750,000 gallons per day less. So which is, just thanks to our customers. Any questions I may be able to answer? Yes, sir.
Just a comment, not that we're anything like San Antonio, but given that I have a father-in-law that lives in San Antonio, I get lots of information. And their San Antonio water system has a process whereby you can ask them to come out and audit your activity at your house and to help you get to the number. And I don't know whether the city can do that here or if we need to generate some sort of a water conservation nonprofit. But it would be a good concept if anybody who wanted could have someone walk through their ongoing day-to-day in whatever stage you are and say, well, how are you using your water? Right? Because most people don't realize how they're using their water, the behaviors that are built in, whether it's how long you're doing your shower, when you do your wash, and there's a whole conservation of water and electricity that we need to give a knowledge out to the average person. Not that people are required to do it, but that the skills are there.
There is a flyer that Texas Water Development Board puts together that shows average daily use throughout components of your house. It's pretty neat. I mean, it's very interesting to see.
But it's easy. It's easier to have someone come in and tell you than have stuff.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have anybody that does that right now. But what we do have is we do have smart meters that were put in 2019. We get hourly readings, and we do work with our utility customers, particularly on the leak side. If we see a continuous flow, and it never goes to zero at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, we're trying to reach out to those people. Hey, there's something's going on. Your sprinkler system is bypassing a valve. You have a toilet that's leaking. Various things like that. So our utility billing clerks do a really good job of trying to reach out to those customers and notify them that there is something going on.
That's a good point. That's a good point, Gary. And, when we talk about per capita daily use, that's exactly the sort of thing that will help us get to our target goal. Again, it's about education. We haven't considered hiring a full-time person or maybe a consultant to, help everyone. I turned to an irrigation professional that presented to the council about 7 or 8 years ago that had a different method of watering, and I've been doing it ever since. It works great. So thank you for that feedback. I wanted to also note that for the mayor's request, this will, and he's here in the back of the room, by the way. We're going to ask the newspaper to publish this report card, maybe just on a weekly basis as we're going through the next couple of hot rod months, just to give you a sense of where we are on that water production. So look for that. I would imagine Tim will give us the nod. Any other questions about water or public works? Yes, sir.
How much water is being pumped onto all the golf courses of the food ranch and out here?
Right, so all of the water that is treated at our wastewater treatment plant, that reclaimed water is basically divided and pumped to this golf course and Boot Ranch. And they exclusively use that water currently. When we're in this type of drought, Boot Ranch does have an agreement with the city to utilize untreated water out of a city well, but not during drought conditions like this. So it's all reclaimed water.
There's no way Boot Ranch is using effluent water on their greens.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't believe that.
And it's a problem.
It has too much salt. I mean, I know the golf course.
And that's
it has
something.
too much salt, it doesn't work.
Right.
So the other thing is they also have swimming pools that I'm sure are full of effluent water.
Right, but they do use 100% effluent on their greens. If you're interested in going out there with me and visiting with anyone, with the superintendent, kind of looking at the operation, that's something they have a very difficult
We
time.
had that conversation with the mayor.
Right.
He didn't want to pursue talking about that anymore.
Right. It's reclaimed water.
I have another question. When was the last time you had a rate increase on water in the city?
We did a rate study as part of our wastewater master plan back in 2017.
Yeah, we sold, the council sold revenue bonds in 2018, and in 2019 was our last rate increase.
2019.
Yes, sir. And we have relatively low water rates.
So the lower your rate, the lower your, the cost, the higher your rate, the higher your cost?
So it's a tiered rate, so if you use very little water, you don't pay as much per 1,000 gallons as if you use, say, over 20 or 30,000. So it's a tiered rate, and I think it's from a little bit over $3 per 1,000 for that lowest, say up to 10,000. And then when you get over, I know when you get over 30, it jumps up to 25,000 gallons. Is it $8, $9?
It's a substantial difference.
Right.
But I can get you that information. It's
Yeah, it'd be
in our-
interesting to know, because unless it hurts some folks in the pocketbook, they're not gonna say.
So you're penalized for using more water.
Exactly.
Right, according to the rate. But I'll tell you, speaking of Boot Ranch, when you look at the top 100 water users, typically we see about 10% of those at Boot Ranch. So again, I'm casting a negative light on Boot Ranch. They don't make up the majority of that top 100 list, but some people don't care what their water bill is every month. And those are the people that we work with on the restrictions and things like that. And a lot of times they have their sprinklers. A lot of people have their sprinkler systems set incorrectly. We work with them to make those adjustments and we issue complying with our regulations. Yes, sir.
I'm Bill Snyder, live in the city. Nobody wants to see their yard burn up as residents. You don't either. I think what residents are looking at is, we've been to stage 3 forever. We've gone to stage 4. And in this heat, stage 4 really doesn't even keep things alive. If we continue, down this path, I can see doing some of the same things that some of these other cities are doing, and maybe outdoor watering is prohibited. On the other hand, we're looking at construction projects. Is there any thought on a moratorium on even new construction? We've already got a lot of construction underway right now. I don't know how we're going to service even those, service everybody. So is there any thought on a moratorium on new construction moving forward until we can get a better handle on our water?
Again, I think that based on what we're seeing, and that's why we're providing the graphical information, right now we're pretty comfortable, especially with that residential high-impact growth rate that we're seeing. Okay? Now, the one development that we're not as comfortable with is what does 1,000 additional apartment units look like? Although that demand is fairly low. Not everyone has a yard, 70% outdoor irrigation, right? So we understand that will have an impact. I'll tell you, one of the projects that we're doing, or will be doing, is investigating where to develop an additional well field or two. A well field is where we get our water. We drill wells, pump the water into our system. If we can spread out those well fields where they don't influence each other, we just firm up that water supply even better. So, Chris, I'm not sure exactly what the status is of that project, but we do have dollars in the budget this year to do that. Again, trying not to influence our other city wells or other wells out of the county. Yes, ma'am.
Regarding water, trees really do help us conserve water because they provide shade for the ground doesn't dry out, they keep the grass still on. But I look at some of the development that's going on down here, and they are just literally scraping clean. Is there any kind of ordinance or regulation, anything that says thou shalt not destroy the tree?
Can you address that?
So we don't have a tree ordinance per se, we do have a landscape ordinance, so when a development does get approved, they do have to provide so many trees per linear foot for parking. So essentially, they're allowed to remove them if they replace them at a certain percentage. So but we don't really have a strong tree ordinance that would protect trees.
That ordinance in our, whatever this is, actually been enforced, in fact, it takes 20-some more years to.
Right. You know, look, and tree ordinances are now a lot harder to adopt. The city of Austin has a very strict tree ordinance, and as you may know, things that happen in Austin then impact the rest of the state, because the state legislature then swiftly says, no, you can't do that. So tree ordinances are very hard to do now because of the state requirements, but we do have a landscaping requirement, and it's something in the comprehensive plan as we look holistically at development, right? Are we going to become more sustainable? Do we want stricter requirements for multiple reasons, right? Those are areas that we can look at, and maybe updating our development code and our subdivision ordinance and those requirements. So overall, if we want to become more water-wise and, yeah, so those are the single ordinances that could be adopted under a larger umbrella after we adopt the comp plan that tells us, hey, this is the direction we want to go, because this is an important.
Well, you can start with that RV park, is right across the street from this one.
Yes, ma'am. And we'll just put out a comp plan update real quick. Comp plan, we're having our next open house on August 9th, and that'll be at the Pioneer Museum, the old sanctuary. They're on San Antonio Street, and that'll be from 3:30 to 7, another come and go event. So put that on your calendars, August 9th.
So it's interesting you're talking about trees and saving trees in development. Councilwoman Kirshner and I were part of a Hill Country Alliance leadership group. It's made up of council members, mayors, county commissioners, county judges in the Hill Country region. And we hear a presentation from development professionals, water professionals. We're concentrating on water supply, water management strategies. Room full of very smart people with respect to that. But we've heard from a gentleman by the name of Matt Lewis with Simple City. Remember that, write that down, check out his website. Matt Lewis, Simple City. And his development strategy, and this has been used in various parts of the state, Bastrop being one of the latest examples, is to develop based on the land and the contours and the trees and salvaging as much of the natural landscape as possible instead of scraping it all, making everything square, creating a bunch of runoff, and creating something, quite frankly, that's visually unpleasing. So a lot of people are very interested in this. Bernie, for instance, is involved in this group. Dr. Joe Macaluso, one of the council members, is part of this group. He talks about how in Bernie, just outside the city limits, there are 1,000-acre ranches that are being sold and developed into 3,000 rooftops. And they go in there and they scrape 90% of everything. It's all just square, creating runoff, impacting the person downstream. And what does that look like once it's finished? What does it look like 10, 20 years from now? So those are things that we have in mind. We're trying to get Matt Lewis here and not talk about that. But those are the types of things, and you're right. It makes it more appealing. It is a water conservation strategy. So,
yes, Matt Kurtz, C-U-R-T-I-S.
Matt Lewis.
And they're in, so you see the Smart City Policy Group?
No, he's with Simple. Matt Lewis. Check him out. Okay, I want to shift to parks right quick. Thanks to Andrea and her crew. You look at page 12. And it has something to do with the weather too. We're having very good attendance at our park pools. So we had a very difficult time hiring lifeguards this year. We bumped up the hourly pay a little bit. If anybody's interested in being a lifeguard, paying $18 an hour, not too good. 16. You have to pass a pretty stringent test. Pools are doing well. If you look at park pool, the major increase is from the splash pad, so it's very popular. A lot of kids play into that. We've also included a calendar of events here. Take a look at that. Again, this will be information that we provide every month. Thank you, Andrew, for sticking that in there. The big event at the end of the month is the swap meet out here. If you haven't been, come out and check it out.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
A lot of questions. This park and Market Plaza have a lot of improvements. Are we thinking about regular action on the visible so that people can see it?
We're talking about two projects currently that are on city facilities that we've started that type of future project. But one of the things that we're looking at, we're currently engaged in is the Parks Master Plan. And that plan will likely contemplate major improvements out here, and we'll certainly take advantage of that where we can.
Well, I know a couple
And where it's visible,
Yeah, where it's
there's
visible.
no doubt that it is.
Yeah, it's just that right now there are a couple of grants that are available to you to actually do this. Where you go and avail yourself of that.
I'll visit with you after, but we need a little bit more info on that. Sales tax. Yes, sir.
Before we get off that, I'd like to mention too that, Market Plot is, we're doing a redevelopment there on the old security station, drive-in bank and everything else. And we have worked real hard on trying to get funding for the Market Plot. And Andrea can give you better the numbers, what we put into the children's playground and also adding some restrooms over there and everything over there. So if anybody would like to donate to the Market Plot redevelopment, we're about we're about 50,000 yet to go. So it's getting real close. It's going to be a really nice facility when we get through. It's going to have a meeting room there, and it's going to have a catering kitchen to it. And anybody who would like to donate, we will accept donations. And I'll give you my phone number if you want to call me. I'll be glad to meet with you. But Andrea has worked real hard on it, and the whole committee there has tried to get money, and we've raised so much that it's been, we raised what? 120 million. So I mean, we're working real hard to get this thing done and finished up, and it's gonna be real nice. You don't have to go down to it.
Set me up for money.
Thank you for that, Jerry. So I'm going to go through the rest of this fairly quickly. And again, turn to, if you would, page 15, sales tax update. So this is a history of sales tax collections over time, starting with FY 2020 to date. The red line at the very top is 2023. You can see that we're doing very well sales tax wise. And so, this is a double-edged sword, definitely. Tourism, balancing that with the needs of the community is something we're very cognizant of. It was a very large part of the mayor's platform. A lot of the things that we're doing, including this particular meeting, is trying to get information out on how we're balancing those things. I'll tell you that this council is very interested in ways to, we'll talk about it here in just a minute, our fire EMS department and our police department. Those departments have to be larger. We need more people and more equipment to service our probably almost 30,000 population town on the weekends that we would normally be servicing a town of 11,000, our normal population. So all of the citizens of Fredericksburg are subsidizing those departments so that we can cover those responses to our big visitor population on the weekend. So that this council is looking for ways to put a little bit more of that burden on our visitors in ways instead of taxing our residents. We've talked about a tourist tax. We've talked about potentially charging fees for gated events on market plots, for instance, to cover some of the cost for security and all public works barricades and things like that. Those are direct costs to y'all. So I want to say that we're very cognizant of that, looking for ways to further balance that. The council said no to a hotel and conference center project last year. Those seem to be moving forward now without city incentives, but I think this council is very interested in this community, hearing your voice, addressing your needs. Parks Master Plan, you saw it in CBB, the community sentiment survey. You know, the CVB markets tourism in Fredericksburg. We want to be a little bit closer to that so that we understand who they're marketing to and for what reasons and what events and so forth. So we're listening to y'all in that regard more now than ever. If you look at the council priorities, we'll be talking about starting next week during our budget discussions. I've put together a budget memo. You can see all of the council priorities listed there. A lot of them are community related. They're not facility related to attract more tourism in Fredericksburg. So again, balancing that out. But when you look at this right here, we're doing very well sales tax wise. You know, all of this translates into more traffic, the need for roadway extension projects. Again, the larger police force, fire EMS response out in the county and so forth. The next couple of slides just show our electric and water revenues and demands. You can see that roughly 20 to 30% reduction in water consumption does translate to lower water revenues. We feel like that will even out somewhat by the end of the summer, although we will be a little bit behind. We do have reserves that can cover that. I would rather have more water in the ground than a little bit more money in the bank. Those are things we plan for. So when you look at those graphs, again, you can see the electric consumption going up, the electric revenues going up with the heat. We did have a very mild spring this year, so we were down just a little bit more than we typically would be. I'm not going to get into it a lot, but property tax, there's always a lot of questions about property tax here. The city's property tax, if you're a city resident, this last year was 14%. 14% of your overall tax bill is city taxes. For every 1 penny on the city tax rate, that generates roughly $275,000. You can see from this graph right here, it's not real clear. The city has generally decreased the tax rate to keep what's called a no new revenue rate. Over the past decade, the city has only adopted a rate other than the no new revenue rate 2 different times. And one was last year, they adopted the same rate. So in other words, they didn't increase the rate. Yeah, if you have any questions about that, you can call. I can fill you in, get you in touch with finance staff. But about 14 to 15% of the overall tax bill. Again, I'm not going to get into a lot of this information, but you can take a look at these graphs. How many calls do you think our PD receives in a 1-year period? Anybody? How many? Would you believe 20,000? Would you believe the time that they spent on calls, the 1,300 calls for service last month, that the time they spend is equivalent to the time one full-time person spends on the job in 1 year? So they spend about an hour and 2 minutes on each call. They get there pretty quick though. Chief, is there anything in particular you would like to address here, or would you like for me to just go through this? Code enforcement, you can see the code enforcement violations. I mentioned the 28 water violations. That's pretty low. Going from one stage to another. Again, thank you for listening. Thank you for conserving. And finally, the trends. Again, this is the type of information that I'd like to continue to show everyone, and how these trends change over time. You'll see a lot more of this graphical data, whether it's development or otherwise. But these are trends since 2015 for calls for service. You can see how those have gone up. Again, this looks like that sales tax increase in a way, right? You know, those big events, more visitors coming. Arrests are pretty flat, citations are pretty flat. You know, warnings are even maybe down just a little bit. Okay, fire EMS, I have Chief Bickle here with us today. Again, this is a shared department budget of the county. This is another one that is affected by our high visitor population coming in every week and weekend. But this is data, if you look at page 27 from June of 2023, where you can see the highest number of calls we had lowest number was 6, with an average number of calls of 12. I think that's about 4,000 to 5,000 calls for service every year, Chief, but both EMS and fire combined. So again, this is what we look like for 2023 if you look at the next page. And then finally, what we look like since this is 2018. And you can see how if you turn to page 29, we had a pretty normal increase as you would expect. And then we had COVID, fewer visitors, fewer calls. Then we had an increase with the ice storm. Everyone remember the ice storm? A lot of fire EMS response to that. Then we leveled out and we had the big brush fire year last year. And we're back to about normal again, but above average, above that average line, you see that dotted line. So again, we're growing in terms of calls for service response calls on fire EMS. I'm not going to get into a lot of the other data in terms of the categories, but you can look at that yourself to see exactly where those calls are going. The last thing I wanted to mention, you can turn to this map right here. These are response times. It's kind of hard to see on this printout. You can look at it online. The response times inside the city limits are just a little bit over 5 minutes. But if you get to some of these more remote areas, you can have response times up to 30, 40 minutes, depending on where you're going. So the volunteer fire departments are very critical, play a very critical role in these overall responses. However, if it's anything major on the medical side, Fredericksburg is always responding to those calls. The important thing to note here, when you look at the numbers, the volume of calls in the city versus outside the city limits. So inside the city, roughly 80% of the calls come from within the city limits, the population center, 20 in the county. But because of the response times and the types of calls that come outside the city limits, the motor vehicle accidents and other things, we spend 80% of our time responding outside the city limits to 20% of the calls. So just to give you an idea. So again, that budget is split 50-50, but that's roughly what that looks like. Also have a couple of maps showing where all of the incidents happen. Again, you can see Fredericksburg being the largest number, 290 East, also being very large, the harbor area. And a heat map finally that just shows again the red areas where those real intense numbers are at. Finally, I wanted to end with our staff vacancies. We have 17 vacant positions now. We had 18 last month. And 5 police officers down. Chief, is that a current number?
Yes, sir.
Is it 5?
5.
So we've been holding at about 5. We added 3 officers to the budget this year, but we can't hire those folks. It's becoming increasingly difficult to hire police officers. Chief, this might be something you want to come up here and weigh in on just right quick before we jump into our next meeting here. But you want to talk about the 1,000 high school graduates that PD got in front of and their response to the question about PD and the military?
Sure, absolutely. Morning, Brian Flores, Chief of Police. So I was at Chiefs Conference a couple months ago, and we were talking about the profession and how we're having mass retirements and nobody's really wanting to join law enforcement, the profession. And over the last couple of years, law enforcement has seen a 46% increase in retirements for multiple reasons. But we had a chief, he was giving a presentation at a 6A high school, so thousands of graduated seniors. And he asked 2 questions. He said, how many of you want to go into law enforcement? Not one single hand was raised. How many of you want to go in the military? 1. Out of a graduating senior class from a 6A high school. So that's the difficulties, not only law enforcement, fire and EMS, emergency services is facing this, this day and age. 20-something years ago, I was fighting for one position with 30, 40, 50 other applicants. We have 5 openings and we can't get 2 applications. So it's very difficult, a lot of contributing factors, not a lot of individuals want to get into law enforcement. So if you know of anybody, friend, family member, child, grandchild, anybody that's interested in law enforcement, send them to the law enforcement center. We'll talk to them, we'll explain everything. And we're very blessed here that the city supports us. We can hire that individual, send them to the academy, pay them while they're going, get them trained, and bring them on board. So, thank you.
I think hiring local is very important and would be very important to our success. We do have a number of officers that live outside the city limits, obviously some outside the county. We're trying to get creative in our hiring processes across the board. We're starting to visit with the council about potentially providing a housing allowance for police officers, emergency response personnel, just with salary savings at this point from the positions we can't fill. Trying to get people into housing here, offer them the opportunity to save a little bit, maybe find a place to live long-term. We're in other positions offering a little bit of flexibility in terms of remote work. We had someone in our finance department leave for a remote work opportunity that paid just a little bit more, and she was wonderful. So we reposted the position with remote work flexibility for a couple of days out of the week, and she came back on board. We're trying to get a little bit more creative again. Some positions it might make sense to do that. We're trying to offer more incentives for especially emergency response folks to come on board. Again, very critical part of what we do here in Fredericksburg. And definitely a problem not only here, but across the state, across the nation. It's just a profession that a lot of people are getting out of, and it doesn't seem like a lot of people are all that interested in getting back into. I am bumping up against time just a little bit here. We're going to have organized for our next meeting just a little bit on our meeting coming up here in a few minutes, and a couple of meetings next week, council meetings next week. This particular meeting is a discussion regarding transportation projects that are included in our transportation master plan for 2016. There are 3 tiers of projects. They're very small projects, mainly intersection improvement projects. We have these mid-range projects that include the extension of Mulberry across 1631 to Eagle Street is one of them. If you can imagine Frederick Road, crossing 16 North, crossing 1631, intersecting with Friendship Lane at Main Street. The extension of South Cherry across the creek to Post Oak, finally intersecting with 16 South, kind of the second mile on the street, and then the extension of Friendship Lane, Tybydale, Kerr Road, crossing 290 West, and finally intersecting 87 North. Those are the mid-tier projects, and the top-tier project is the relief route. So just providing an update to the council on the relief route. And then we're also talking about the landfill, the future of the landfill. We have, give or take, 10 years of useful life left at the landfill. So we're talking about adjusting rates just a little bit to control that volume. We're also talking about whether it makes sense to expand the footprint of that landfill or build a transfer station to ship that waste out of Fredericksburg. When we have all of our eggs in one basket with our water supply being groundwater, landfills are a huge liability, a huge risk. If that water was ever contaminated, that would be a huge issue here. So we're pushing very hard to come up with a very solid plan with options to address the landfill needs. We'll be giving the council a tour of all of these things and how all of those roadway projects relate to new development, newly annexed areas, and so forth. So that's coming up here in just a few minutes. We also have 2 budget workshops next week, both at 1 o'clock in this room. on Monday and Wednesday of next week. On Monday, we'll be talking about general fund budget. That includes PD, parks, the street department, a number of other departments. And then we'll be talking about the enterprise funds, the water fund, the electric fund, and all of the departments related to those funds next Wednesday again at 1 o'clock in this room. Is it 1 o'clock? 1 o'clock? 1 o'clock in this room. So you're welcome to come out and listen in, learn a little bit more about the budget. Our budget process is a lot more transparent. This year it will be. We have a new software package. We have let the council, given the council certain access privileges in where they can look at a lot of the changes that have been made. We're also working on a similar module for the public where you can get in and look at the budgets, see how they've changed, compare those year to year, and so forth. So again, it's just an effort. Oh, one more thing. There will be a function where you can take your tax bill. Say you paid the city, your city part of the taxes was $500. You can plug that in, and it will show you where every dollar goes. That's PD, streets, water, whatever the case may be. So if you ever had that question, you'll be able to see that. And we're going to unveil that next week. We will make that available to the public. So I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to entertain any questions today, but my door's open and I answer phone calls and emails and so forth. You're more than welcome to get back with me if you have any questions about this, have any other feedback. Just one question.
I want to thank the staff and the employees of Fredericksburg. You're not going to find a neater, cleaner place in the state, in the United States. What we have here.
Well, and I'd like to thank our city council. They're the ones that fund all of the things that we use to take care of this great city and keep it going. Without them giving us the tools we need, we couldn't do our job. So thank you, Mayor, City Council. Thanks for being here.